Leaders are readers. So I am always devouring books. I've got a stack of books on my stand next to my bed. I'm always reading the news. I'm reading blogs, reading emails that I subscribe to, listening to podcasts, because leaders are readers. When you stop learning, you stop leading. And yesterday, I stumbled across an amazing blog post article from our friend Carey Nieuwhof, and it was so good. It was one of those articles where you read it and it crystallizes and encapsulates what you've been thinking and feeling. And that's what it was for me. I've linked it down below, but the article by Carey Nieuwhof that grabbed my attention yesterday is entitled "Why They're Not Actually Your Friends: A Hard Truth for Pastors and Church Leaders." And he was able to perfectly and succinctly put into words feelings and thoughts that I've been wrestling with over the past 18 months. It was so powerful for me that I immediately shared it all over Twitter and Facebook. And I've had other friends who are in church leadership respond saying, wow. So for those of you who have not read the article, allow me just a few moments to read it to you and then to share a couple of quick thoughts. Carey writes, over the last year and a bit, I've talked to so many leaders who are distraught over how many friends, often people they thought of as close friends, have left their church. And when they left, they also ended the friendship. Friends they've worked with or served with end up no longer being friends, quitting the church, leaving staff, or even walking out for good over a disagreement. Leaders have struggled with the problem for years. Pastors, even more so. Side note, this isn't in the article. Seminaries would better serve and prepare church leaders if they offered an entire course on rejection and losing friends. Back to the article. Carey writes, no surprise, but this phenomenon intensified over the last 2 years as COVID isolated people and culture became more divided on almost every issue. First of all, I empathize. It's happened to me too, Carey writes. It hurts, sometimes at the soul level. And friendships, being the unique relationships that they are, once built, are often difficult to replace. That said, I've also had decades to find a different perspective. So Carey writes, are you ready for a contrary view? What if they were never your friends? I'm not trying to be mean or question your relational IQ. I mean, I get it. You're saying, but we had dinner with these people. We went on vacations together. We were at each other's houses all the time. Our kids played together. We were close. I realize that. But again, the question, what if they were never actually your friends? I know what you're thinking. What? But hear me out. True friendships don't depend on your leadership. They depend on the relationship. And as long as you're the leader, you've got a few variables in the friendship that make it hard to discern whether that is truly a friendship that will survive your leadership. I mean, you know the stereotype of the business leader who retires and is later shocked to discover his phone never rings and everyone he used to hang out with isn't interested in him anymore. Similar thing happens to pastors and church leaders. Carey writes, I'm going to share why that's the case, but hang on to the end for some hope. Understanding the unique dynamics of leadership and friendships should make pain of processing relational transitions easier, not harder. So here's why it's weird. The problem is your power. Aside from any normal relational struggles you and I bring to life, welcome to the human race. We all do. Leadership brings a strange dynamic to any friendship: power. Even if your leadership's approach leans egalitarian, you see yourself as equal to your team, not above them. The challenge remains: you hold power. Beyond the power to hire and fire, you also hold the power to determine the mission and direction of your organization. Your words weigh more, and you have the clout that simply accompanies the position you hold, whether you feel like you do or not. I've done everything I can to shake the power imbalance over the years and use my power to benefit others, yet still that dynamic remains. As a leader, you hold power. As a result, and here's the dynamic: people build relationships with you for reasons other than just pure friendship. Sometimes they've built a relationship with you because they want to be close to their leader, or they want some influence over your organization's future direction. Other times they're just drawn to the leader's charisma, and that's not cynical. That's just real. And they may not even realize they're doing it. You likely won't know it's happening, except it is. They'll use the term friend, and it will resemble a real friendship in many ways, but it will always be influenced by the power dynamic. Flex that power in the wrong direction, say the wrong thing, or make the wrong move, whatever that is, and the friendship strains or dissolves. The problem when you're friends with a leader often isn't relational, it's positional. And here's why pastoring is even weirder. Ministry is the perfect storm. Carrie writes, I spent over 2 decades as a pastor in the local church. If you think leadership is weird, ministry is weirder. And here's why. Ministry is the perfect storm. Work, faith, and community collide. Carey writes that when he was in law, those spheres of life were separate and clear. But when you enter full-time vocational ministry, everything melted into one. And Carey's right. Ministry is strange. What you believe is also what you do. And the people you serve are also your community. And if I could just give an aside from this brilliant article, it's true, especially when you start a church from scratch, like Amber and I did. You start with no people. I mean, literally 10 years ago, Amber and I were having our first informational meeting, and we were crossing our fingers. We were nervous. Like 5 minutes before, I remember looking out the window, seeing, is anybody going to show up for this informational meeting about a church that doesn't exist? And so when people come in the door, as the lead planter, you're seeking validation for this dream. You're seeking to gain support financially and volunteers. And so you'll cling to people right away. And that blurs the lines between true friendship and leadership. Back to Carey's article. This can create many issues, but let's focus on the relational impact. No one can really see you as just, you. You're always the pastor. It makes any friendships you have harder because you can't talk about absolutely everything. It would be inappropriate, for example, to talk to a friend in the congregation about a struggle you have with your board, or discuss personnel challenges you're having with staff, with the church member you play golf with every Saturday. Side note, I don't play golf. I tried playing it once. I ended up losing my whole day. I sweat a lot, and I was just hitting a ball around. Side note back. Carey writes, similarly, if you're frustrated with your church, you can hardly unload about it with an unchurched friend, because it's bizarre to complain about the gossip in your church to an unchurched friend and then invite them out next Sunday. it leaves a lot of pastors feeling like they have no escape. One of the best practices I had is to have a few friends who don't work for me or live near me that I can talk to about anything. A good therapist is a great idea too. So by now you may be thinking that your friendships are different, that they really are authentic and they really are lifelong. Well, maybe. And if so, that's awesome. But try this. As much as you're enjoying the relationship, do something associated with your position that they don't like and see what happens. For thousands of pastors in the last 2 years, that kind of move dissolved the relationship. You say the wrong thing, you didn't say something, you said too much, you said too little, you wore a mask, you didn't wear a mask, you got vaccinated, you didn't get vaccinated, you opened too early, you opened too late, and now people are gone from your church. I thought these people were my friends, you complain. No, you were their leader, or they were your colleagues. It felt like friendship, it functioned like friendship, but it wasn't really friendship. A genuine friendship endures when the position doesn't. Let me say that again, because that's brilliant. Carey writes, a genuine friendship endures when the position doesn't. Of course, this is really hard to see when you still hold the position, but I promise you, this dynamic happens all the time. Been reading from this brilliant blog article that came out yesterday from Carey Nieuwhof. The title is Why They're Not Actually Your Friends, A Hard Truth for Pastors and Leaders. It's real. And as I said before, when I came across this article, it put into words thoughts and feelings that I've been wrestling with and struggling with for the past 18 months. I mean, I have a great Christian counselor who's helped me a ton. I'm married to a counselor, okay? And 20 years in ministry, you understand Jesus's words when he says, hey, if they rejected me, they'll reject you. Or in 1 Timothy, when it says, if you're trying to live a truly godly life in Christ Jesus, you will be rejected. But it still hurts, especially when it's your closest confidants, when it's the people who you thought were your best friends, the people that you've poured your life into, that you've taught everything you know about ministry and life and leadership. And it really stings when your family has sacrificed for them. Like your family has sacrificed not just their emotional energy, but financially for them. And then they just walk away. Or worse is when they try to sabotage the church that you love and you don't understand why, and you reach out to them and they will not take your call. They won't take your text. They ghost you. They ignore you. They treat you like the Amish. That's been my 18 months. And I know there's other church leaders who have experienced the same levels of woundedness and hurt. For all the talk on podcasts and the Christian deconstruction movement about, spiritual abuse by church leaders, what about pastors who get kicked to the curb? What about church leaders who discover that the people that they've been doing life with, to them, it wasn't a genuine friendship? It was a strategic alliance. This article by Carey Nieuwhof has just been so helpful to me. And as I've been sharing it with my ministry friends, they all respond and go, oh my goodness, this is what needs to be taught in seminaries right here. This is what needs to be shared more with pastors and church leaders to normalize the experience. So I'm a doctoral student right now. It means I do a lot of reading. I just started a new class this week, and the professor is having us read 1 Timothy over and over and over again. And so these words kind of leapt off the page to me from the book of 1 Timothy chapter 1. Paul says in verse 4, don't let people waste time in endless speculation over myths and spiritual pedigrees. So don't waste time with gossip. For these things only cause arguments. They don't help people live a life of faith in God. The purpose of my instruction is that all the Christians there would be filled with love that comes from a pure heart, a clear conscience, and a sincere faith. Man, I don't know of any pastor or church leader who doesn't desire that, to be in community with their people, to not see a separation between shepherd and sheep, but to do life and to deeply connect, flaws and all, without fear of rejection and gossip. And it's terribly disappointing when you discover that your right-hand guy, your associate pastor, tries to hijack the church behind your back. And when they don't succeed, then they try to tank the church. And yet that's the story for so many church leaders. Paul writes in 1 Timothy 1, some teachers have missed this whole point. They have turned away from these things and they spend their time arguing and talking foolishness. They want to be known as teachers of the law, but they don't know what they're talking about, even though they seem so confident. Paul goes on in 1 Timothy, verse 18, he says, Timothy, my son, here's what I want you to know. May the words that were spoken over you give you the confidence to fight well in the Lord's battles. See, when you feel that betrayal and that rejection, when your character is slandered, when your church that you've sacrificed everything for is getting kicked to the curb by users and abusers, you do want to throw in the towel. And that's why Paul is always saying, fight the good fight. Stand firm in your faith, Ephesians 6. Here he's saying, have confidence to fight well in the Lord's battles. Cling tightly to your faith in Christ and to always keep your conscience clear. For some people have deliberately violated their consciences. As a result, their faith has been shipwrecked. Man, one of my heart's desires is to finish well. That whenever God calls me home, hopefully many, many decades from now, that I'll have finished well with integrity, with a segment of heaven that's fuller, with children who love the Lord, and with a ministry that is above reproach. I would never want to use someone to take their platform and use it for financial gain, to take their sheep and split a church, to take advantage of their friendship, to steal away from their platform and their influence. I would certainly never want to drag someone's name through the mud with lies and slander and half-truths. So I think that's why Carey Nieuwhof's article struck a chord with me and many, many friends in ministry. When they're not actually your friends, a hard truth for pastors and leaders. So I highly encourage you to read the article. It's linked below if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube Live. It's a fantastic article. It's what I would say is required reading for anyone who's thinking of going into ministry, whether it's full-time ministry or even as a volunteer. Part of the role of church leadership is to have thick skin and a soft heart, to understand that you're working with sheep when you're a shepherd, and sheep sometimes bite, but they're still sheep. So you can't fight back. You don't get down in the mud and get muddy. Instead, you have to take the high road. You have to choose to be misunderstood. You have to choose to be willing to meet anytime, anywhere, personally, privately, but never getting into a public dispute in Facebook comments. That's silly. And yes, sometimes to warn sheep of wolves who are seeking financial gain or who are using and abusing God's people, splitting, hurting God's family. You know, God does not bless mess. And God won't bless a ministry that's taking shots at the bride. That's Jesus's bride. So I'm thankful for this article. It came out yesterday. It's linked below. It's available at carrienewhoff.com, titled Why They're Not Actually Your Friends, A Hard Truth for Pastors and Leaders. And I'm thankful that in this new season, we all got a fresh, clean slate with COVID. We all got a Control-Alt-Delete. We all got a do-over in our churches and ministries. I'm so thankful that now we have the opportunity to retire some things, to revamp, to reboot, and to restore what is broken, because that's what Jesus does. Jesus always leaves the welcome mat at the door. And I think what Amber and I are really discovering in this new season, even here at Life Church, is how to have deeper, better, genuine friendships that are not built on a leadership position. And we're able to sniff that out more now and not be so, I don't know what the right word would be. To not be taken by those with false motives. That's an axiom you can live by. Our door is always open. Our phone lines are always open. We're willing to meet with anybody, anytime. But so thankful for leaders like Carrie Nieuwhof, who are helping shepherd church leaders, normalizing their situations, saying you're not crazy, and saying here's a better way forward. So check out that article for sure. I hope this has been helpful to you. I know it's helpful for me just to process and to think through what other church leaders are genuinely wrestling with and trying to figure out on their own. Hey, I'd love to connect with you. I'm on social media at High5John, at High5, Jon. You can find our church at lifechurchmichigan.com, and you can find me at jonathanheron.com. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a fantastic night.